In this final video, I want to get into practical application. And by that, I don't mean giving you new exercises or scales to work your voice, but rather how to apply these concepts into what you're already doing, especially songs. The quicker we can get into songs as a singer and as a teacher, the better, because obviously that's the ultimate goal. I want to talk for a moment about vowel tuning versus vowel modification. Modification is the changing of the vowel as a single unit, going from ah to or ah to eh. It's useful for beginning singers who don't really have a concept of the sounds that they're making. And certainly if someone's struggling with pulling chest and we need to make very broad moves of the vowel in order to break that strong F1H2 relationship, that pulled chest relationship, then by all means, we have to do these very obvious vowel moves. But for the advanced singer, we need something more. We need vowel tuning. And tuning is precise adjustments of both individual resonators. It really is the precise adjustment of the first and the second formant independently, so that each one is having a relationship with the harmonics that is optimal for power, for ease, for beauty of tone, for all of these things. Let's look at what the formants need to do in different parts of our vocal range. When we're in low chest, on our lowest notes, we need a high first formant. We need that formant to align with a rather high harmonic in order to give the voice energy. Otherwise, it's going to be very dull. You're going to lose chord closure. It's not going to be much of a singing sound. Upper chest, you need a slightly lower first formant. You don't want it on those very high harmonics. They're going to be out of range of that resonator. Your primary bridge, mix, cover, whatever you want to call it, requires the F1 to continue to lower and the second formant to be rather low as well, because the corresponding harmonic that it's going to tune to isn't as high as it's ultimately going to be in upper head voice. Head voice is going to require a higher F2. The second formant's going to start to track the harmonic as it goes higher. You can continue to track the high harmonic with the second formant or your mouth resonator for very intense, robust singing. Or you can lower the second formant to a slightly lower harmonic, and that's going to give you maybe a more lyric, more rounded type of sound, less intense. I want to recap how the parts of the body affect the formants. When you round your lips, you're going to lower both of the formants. When you widen your lips, you're going to raise both of the formants. When you drop your jaw, you're going to raise the first formant. Adjusting the larynx is going to raise or lower the first formant. Lower larynx gives a lower first formant. Higher larynx gives a higher first formant. Moving the tongue, the back of the tongue is that acoustic separator. When it comes forward, it lowers the first formant because the throat area is now longer. It raises the second formant because the mouth resonator is now smaller. The opposite is true when you move the tongue back. The mouth area becomes bigger, so the second formant drops. The throat area becomes shorter. That tube is decreased, and so the first formant raises. This movement of lips and tongue create two different families or groupings of vowels. The first grouping is called forward vowels. They're not named because you tend to feel the resonance more forward. It's actually because of where the tongue is positioned. In this family of vowels, the tongue is forward and moves forward on each subsequent more narrow vowel, if you will. It goes from a, e, I, E. Each one of these vowels requires the tongue coming further and further up and forward. The second group are back vowels, so named because the tongue is back. The tongue is more neutral, and now the lips are doing the adjusting. That's oo. On each vowel, the lips are becoming more and more rounded. So we have these two different groupings of vowels. The reason I bring these up is that when you're dealing with a problem vowel, you're going to want to know which family it's from, whether it's a forward vowel or a back vowel. That way you'll know what to adjust, whether your primary adjustments should be with the tongue or with the lips when attempting to tune the vowel. Here are the formant adjustments and how we're going to do them for the different parts of our register. Chest, you remember, requires the higher first formant. So in low chest, we're going to have a higher larynx and we're going to have wider lips. In our upper chest voice, going into the primary bridge, we want to drop the first formant as well as dropping the second formant. So we're going to lower the larynx and we're going to round our lips. This is kind of the first vowel adjustments that many singers will learn to narrow the vowels as they approach their bridge. And that works great in that part of the voice. The trap, though, is thinking that this continued narrowing will work on higher notes. Because as you go from the bridge to the head voice, you want your larynx stabilized and you want to drop the jaw. We don't want the larynx coming up in order to raise the first formant unless you're doing it for a vocal effect. But if you want a nice, full, rich tone, you basically want a stable larynx. Dropping the jaw will raise the first formant enough that it stays involved in resonance as an amplifier. You can then, in order to raise the second formant, widen the lips and or move the tongue forward. Now here's what happens if we try and keep the vowel narrow as we go into the head voice. The second formant is now too low and it's not aligning with the correct harmonic. It's going to be on the wrong harmonic, or it's even going to fall in between the harmonics. When this happens, we don't get that feedback of energy to the vocal cords. When we align a formant with a harmonic, there's a boost of energy that's created in the system. And that energy feeds back to the vocal cords and assists them in closing and resisting air. That's why when the voice is properly aligned, it's actually quite easy to sing the high notes. Singers will say, wow, that feels like it's singing itself. When we keep narrowing on the higher notes, we're not getting that feedback of energy. We're going to start squeezing. We're going to feel an imbalance. It doesn't really work. So don't assume just because narrowing the vowel helps you in your primary bridge that you're going to keep doing the same thing as you go higher. It's not going to work well for you. Beginning singers, okay. They're not really ready to begin widening the mouth, adjusting the tongue, really tracking those higher harmonics with the second formant. That's a more advanced skill. So for beginning singers, it's okay. They'll have to sing a little lighter, but we want to break that chest pull, that F1H2 coordination that when taken too high causes so many problems. I want to get into corner vowels. Corner vowels are oo, e, ah. They're basically the most extreme positions of the tongue. E has a tongue that's high and forward. It's the furthest forward of any of the vowels. Oo, the tongue is still high and it's the furthest back. Ah, now the tongue is low and still back. These vowels need to be brought more towards the center, and center vowels are more and The tongue position isn't quite as extreme. When you have that pure E vowel, the mouth resonator is pretty small. and the throat resonator is pretty big, and it tends to not align very well in certain parts of the voice. So the more we decrease the extreme tongue positions, the better we're going to be able to go through these bridges. I want to talk about oo and e vowels. They actually need to begin to open in the transition. So many times we talk about narrowing vowels through the bridge, especially the primary bridge, when in fact oo and e, because of the tongue position, they're not going to align well. They actually need to come more towards center. So in a sense, they're becoming more open. It's the opposite of, say, an ah vowel, which does need to close in that main bridge. The reason? The second formant's not tuned. It's going to be too high on E, the tongue is too far forward, the mouth resonator is too small, the tongue is too far back on oo, so the second formant is too low. It's not aligning with the correct harmonic. What actually needs to happen on these vowels is that the tongue and lips need to come to a more neutral position. On E, the tongue needs to come back a little bit to E as you go through your main bridge. And on oo, the tongue can come slightly forward, but also the lips can open a little bit. They're too narrow on spoken oo. Therefore, F2 is too low. It becomes more oo in order to go through the bridge. Otherwise, squeezing is almost inevitable, or flipping. Now I'd like to look at some tuning exercises that I use with students to help them align their formants in different parts of their vocal range. In lower chest, I like to tune the first formant with an A vowel. A is going to give a higher larynx, and it's also going to give wider lips, both of which raise the first formant. This allows the first formant to tune with a relatively high harmonic. That's going to give this low note enough energy to cut through the music. It also gives a feedback of energy to the vocal cords so that the singer is able to sing with more intensity as well. Once we have that A, that first formant tuned, I then adjust the second formant. So we adjust the mouth to whatever vowel it is that we need. For instance, if we're going to go from ow or I maintain the A condition in the throat and just finish the vowel with movements of the mouth. In the upper chest, that first formant's going to go more towards an ah. We don't quite want the A anymore. Those high harmonics are going to move out of the range of the throat resonator. So the ah is going to drop the larynx a little. It's going to round the lips ever so slightly. It's going to set us up better for that upper chest area. And again, we can go towards the oo, e, whatever we need from that position. In the transition, I take F1 more towards an We need that first formant to continue to drop. We want to unhook it from the second harmonic, and is going to assist in that. If a student's really struggling there, I'll even take it towards an And again, I'll move from the to the other vowels. The second formant is relatively low here. So we want to make sure that the lips don't open too much. We're going to keep the mouth rather narrow. Now we come to head voice. In head voice, I like to tune the first formant with an and hold that position as I move to the other vowels. It gives a nice stable larynx. It gives some nice depth to the sound, stops the urge from the larynx wanting to rise with the pitch. However, there is a difference here in head voice. We want to drop the jaw in order to raise the first formant. This is because the fundamental pitch is getting higher and higher. And if we drop the larynx and we don't drop the jaw, the first formant's going to be too low and it's going to be diminished as a resonator. So we want to raise it in order to keep it involved with amplifying the pitch. However, dropping the jaw is a great way to raise it without having to bring the larynx up. Now, I'm not saying you can never sing with a higher larynx, but I do want it under your control. And if you want a really rich, powerful sound, a more stable larynx is usually the better choice. F2 is going to need to rise for a robust sound. It's now tracking that harmonic, and that harmonic is moving higher and higher. So in order to raise the second formant, we're going to want to make lip and tongue adjustments. The mouth is going to start to get a bit wider. That's going to raise the second formant, and you can move the tongue forward, which is also going to raise the second formant. Advanced head voice strategies. You can use tongue movement on back vowels. Remember when we talked about that group of vowels, the tongue was back and rather stable, and the lips were making the adjustment for the formant. You can add a bit of forward tongue movement in order to boost the second formant a little higher. So on an ah, you can move the tongue ever so slightly forward on these higher notes to get a little more bite out of it. Subsequently, on the front vowels, when you're singing e, you can begin to open the lips of the mouth. Spread them a little wider, e, on those higher notes, again, to really bring in those high harmonics and track them with the second formant. Diphthongs, the two vowel sounds together, are a great way to tune in resonance. It's basically narrow to wider vowels, so you get that nice sweep of the mouth when you make them. Way, wow, whoa, we. These are all diphthongs that you can use, and what happens is in the very beginning of that sound, you have an oo, you have narrow lips, which is going to instantly lower the first formant. It's actually going to lower both, so you get that drop in the first formant, and then as the lips sweep to the more open position, it's going to raise F2, and somewhere within that, the singer will begin to feel the proper alignment and tuning. So I like to use those diphthong exercises quite often. Song application. And this is what I feel is really important. Moving into songs as quickly as possible. Original lyric fragments. This is a great way to create little song snippets that are going to encourage the voice to be balanced, depending on which register you're in. I use words that are friendly to each register. So for example, a type words for chest, a type of words for the bridge. So in chest, you could have the singer sing, "That fat cat sat." All of these a vowels are going to have a relatively high first formant that's going to dial into a higher harmonic and really give the singer the feeling of strong chest voice. You can create different melodies. They can be very close together. They can start to skip a little bit, but it's also giving the singer a chance to feel language within song. Sometimes in exercises, we're just thinking of the sound, and then when we go to the song, the language takes over, and we haven't really made the jump from the exercises to the songs. So if we start thinking of sounds as associated with language, and then changing the shades of the language depending on where we are, that's a huge step for the singer. Now, if we're in the transition, a great line would be, "Love does wonders." All of those vowels are rather narrow. You've got the at the larynx. The love does the wa narrows the lips, drops the formants. So it's a good way to break the pulling of chest. And you can make up all kinds of these lyric fragments, and they're very, very helpful, and the singers have a good time with them. Now you can take song lyric fragments, and this is taking bits of already existing songs and isolating just a few words and a little melodic fragment and then starting to move that on half steps. That actually becomes a vocal exercise. So you isolate the passage and then you just move it up or down on half steps. A very famous one that's used a lot is the word shame in I Dreamed a Dream that walks up. I believe it's from an E flat to a B flat right in the middle of the bridge. Walks right up the scale, the range of a fifth. So if you take that and start moving it down by half steps and up by half steps, the singer's going to have to make different adjustments depending on where the starting pitch is. And they're really going to have to start to feel the movement of the tongue to go from that A towards A as they ascend on that fragment. Let's look at word adjustments, how we're going to adjust words depending on where we are. If we take the ah of all or I, that's the widest back vowel, ah, ah. Now in low chest, I like to add a bit of ah into that condition. It becomes I, all. Again, to raise that first form and to get the higher harmonic, give low chest some energy. In upper chest, it goes back towards the ah. In the transition, it's going to take on more of an condition. Ul, I. Now the word I, again, is a diphthong. There's two vowel sounds there, ah and e. And for beginning singers, this is tricky because they really don't process it as two individual vowel sounds. And what makes it even harder for them is the combination of e doesn't exist in English, so that may throw them a little bit. So they really have to isolate the ah sound from the e, because we're usually going to sustain on the first part of a diphthong, and then feel that ah shade towards so they can tune the vowel in the transition. As they go to head voice, they're going to want to keep that or even condition at the larynx, but now we have to raise the second formant. So the mouth resonator can start going back towards the ah. It becomes a fraction of and ah. The lip movement adjusts the formants in this vowel, but you can also start to include the tongue as well. If you're really trying to boost that second formant to get it a little higher, the tongue can come just slightly forward as well, even though this is technically a back vowel. Now we'll take the as in the word that. That's the widest front vowel, ah. In low chest, we'll keep it as that. That vowel works very well down there. As you get to upper chest in the transition, it's going to go towards that. The tongue will move a little bit forward, and what that's going to do is that's going to lower that first formant and raise the second a little bit. Don't start getting the lips too wide on that though, because we don't want that second formant too high yet. In head voice, now we go back to the larynx is going to have the or so it doesn't start to rise with the pitch. And then we can go towards I. So it becomes that. The tongue movement is adjusting the formants on this vowel, but you can also begin to adjust the lips and the mouth can get wider on this. Non-static vowels. This is the idea that the fundamental and harmonics are moving on every half step. Therefore, the vowel needs to adjust as well. You want adjustments on every note, especially in the transition in head. The reason being because the changes between the fundamental and the harmonics are greater and greater on each half step. It's 6% greater on each one. So by the time you get into your upper head voice, there's quite a bit of change on each half step. So the vowels subsequently are going to have to change. If you are on a word and the word moves on notes, so the vowel is moving to different pitches, don't set it and forget it. Keep adjusting that vowel on every pitch. Really important to become a very strong singer. When you're doing vocal riffs and they're often on a single sound, slow those down and tune every note, tune every vowel to every pitch. If you do that, your riffs will become so much stronger and cleaner. Vowel isolation. This is another great exercise that you can use songs for. Remove the consonants. Take a line, take all the consonants out, and just concentrate on the vowel sounds, moving from vowel to vowel. Again, tuning each one. Just do it on a few words. Don't try and do this through a whole song. Isolate a difficult section, maybe even just take 2 words, and just go from the primary vowel on one word to the primary vowel on another. These can be very close to each other in terms of melody, or it can be a big jump. But isolating really gives the singer a chance to focus down on the exact sounds that they're making and to really do some intense work with vowel tuning. Slow down. Tune each vowel. Slow is key here. Now, what I want to do is I want to recap the most important points that I want you to take away from this lecture. Vowels are 2 resonants or formants blended together. We hear it often as one unit, but as the singer, we need to think of it as 2. We're giving 2 boosts to the sound wave. They're called the first and second formant, F1 and F2, and we can tune each of them separately. That is extremely important. As you're able to adjust them independently, you can really get into some very, very strong, powerful singing. F1H2 is the hardest tuning to break. Again, that's pulled chest, that's the yell, that's the shout. It's the first formant on the second harmonic, which is very important, which is what we want in our upper chest, but we don't want to take it beyond that. And the voice often doesn't want to let go of that tuning. It's very strong in our nervous system. And again, for beginning singers, it may be too difficult to break, so that we need to create exercises, again, those exaggerated sounds like nasty or hooty, dopey, that stop that tuning from really taking place. At least temporarily, we need to keep the singer away from that shouting condition. Here are some resources for you for further study. There is Resonance in Singing by Dr. Donald Miller. Dr. Miller developed Voce Vista, the program that I've been showing you the screenshots from. This book is probably the definitive work on formants and harmonics and how this all goes together with singing. You can get it at voiceinsideview.com. And what's great is this book actually comes with a copy of the Voce Vista software. So you can go through, you can analyze your own voice, you can run recordings through it and see what your favorite singers are doing. It's just great. Teaching Good Singing by Dean Kalin, who's a great voice teacher out of Salt Lake City. He has a chapter in this book that was written by Dr. Hubert Noe, who again is a great pioneer in this work of formants and harmonics. He has a great chapter on science and singing, and it ties in very well to the rest of Dean's book, which I recommend highly. You can get that at Dean's website, deankalin.com. Just go there and just find the store where he has books. This is actually an ebook, so you can order it and download it right away and get to reading. Another great resource is the National Center for Voice and Speech, headed up by Dr. Ingo Tietze. Dr. Tietze is a brilliant researcher. He has all kinds of tutorials on there, as well as books. Some of it gets quite advanced and quite deep, and there are also books for the singer as well. He is at ncvs.org, and I recommend that website very, very highly. And finally, I just want to say thank you for spending the time with me and being willing to learn about this. I really feel that this is important. It's really helped my singing. It's certainly helped my teaching. And the results for the students I've worked with have been dramatic. Some of it seems subtle. Some of it may be things that you're already doing with just the tiniest little tweak. But those little tweaks will make all the difference. So I encourage you to go back, listen to this again, go to the resources that I've recommended, really get into this. It's just quite fascinating and very useful and practical. My website is johnhenney.com. You can email me, john@johnhenney.com. I'd love to hear from you. I'm happy to work with any of you. I'm available for lessons, masterclasses, etc. On Twitter, it's @JohnHenneyVocals. And on Facebook, John Henney Vocals. Again, thank you so much and take care. Bye-bye.